Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dirk. Thank you for joining our live interactive telephone town hall. We're hosting tonight's event to give Congresswoman Spanberger the opportunity to hear directly from you and answer your questions about the issues facing Virginia's families, seniors, and economy. As I mentioned, this event is an interactive forum. Congresswoman Spanberger will be taking as many questions as she possibly can during this event. If you have a question, you can press *3 on your telephone keypad at any time. Be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. They'll then take down your name and where you're calling from. The next time you hear your name, you'll be live on the call and able to ask your question directly. You can also ask a question by submitting one through the portal below our online streaming player. You can find that at spanberger.house.gov/live. Again, that's spanberger.house.gov/live. Now, if you're watching on Facebook Live tonight and wish to ask the Congresswoman a question, we encourage you to visit that online streaming portal so you can submit that question of yours. Additionally, if you would like to receive updates from our office via email, please press *6 on your telephone keypad at any time. Then an operator will collect your email address. Now, we could receive a lot of questions during this event, so if we're not able to address your question, please call our district office at 703-987-2180 during normal business hours. Again, our district office number, 703-987-2180. If you have any questions throughout this event, remember to press *3 on your telephone keypad or type your question right below the streaming player. Now, please welcome Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Abigail Spanberger, and I am so proud to represent Virginia's 7th District in the U.S. House of Representatives. I want to thank you for joining this evening's town hall. I hope everyone on the line is staying warm in the wake of this week's weather. I want to thank the hardworking Virginians who have cleared our roads, responded to car troubles and accidents, and kept Virginians updated throughout this storm. I also want to thank our dedicated first responders who work night and day to keep our neighbors safe. Thank you for all that you do every single day. So I'd like to begin by just giving a quick update on the state of things here on Capitol Hill. As many of you know, we are only a few days away from a potential partial government shutdown. As I have said time and time again, at any time I can, shutdowns are always bad for Virginians. Shutdowns are always bad for Virginia's economy. They are absolutely devastating for federal employees, contractors, and so many of the small business owners that I represent. This week, I am optimistic that the House will approve a short-term temporary stopgap funding measure, a continuing resolution. But at the end of the day, the short-term fix only solves the problem until March. I will vote for it. I want to avoid any potential government shutdown. But this is, it is just each month bouncing from challenge to challenge, just not a way to fund the government. We absolutely need Congress to work in a bipartisan manner with Democrats and Republicans working together to actually push through our appropriations bills. We are still talking about FY24, and this is legislation that should have been through Congress before the end of September. To protect the livelihoods and hundreds of thousands of Virginians, I will continue to press my colleagues, particularly Speaker Johnson, to make sure that he does bring this continuing resolution to the floor, that we do avoid another reckless shutdown, and that we do quickly fund the government. But I also recognize that even the talk of a potential government shutdown, as we have had so many times over this past year, creates chaos and challenges for so many small business owners, for so many Virginians, and so many of the people that I represent. A few weeks ago, President Biden signed into law my bipartisan bill to help crack down on fentanyl trafficking. So this is specifically a bill that would make sure that our government is focused on dismantling two of the cartels that are predominantly responsible for moving the majority of illicit fentanyl into the United States. This effort is part of what needs to ultimately be an all-hands-on-deck strategy to address the fentanyl crisis, both before it crosses into our country and certainly once it's here. We need to do more to not only prevent fentanyl from making its way to our streets and communities, which is what this legislation would do, but we also need to commit as a country to making real investments in prevention, treatment, and recovery. That's how we will support and protect our fellow Americans in our communities. That's how we save lives. And I am proud that we have passed legislation, gotten the president to sign it into law to do just that. There's still much more to be done, and I continue to be focused on this and many other issues. Just one final reminder before we go to questions. If you or a loved one, a neighbor, anyone's having an issue with a federal agency at this time, please be in touch with my congressional office at 703-987-2180. You can also go to spanberger.house.gov. Challenges with Social Security or OPM or the VA, we are here to help, and I welcome you to give us a call. I look forward to answering your questions, and thanks so much for joining us this evening.
So as a reminder, this forum is interactive, and we would love to hear your questions. So if you have a question, all you need to do is press *3 on your telephone keypad at any time to get into the queue to ask that question. A member of the Congresswoman's staff will collect your name and where you're calling from. Then the next time you hear your name, you'll be live and able to ask your question right here, right now. You can also ask a question by submitting one through the portal below our online streaming player at spanberger.house.gov/live. Again, that's spanberger.house.gov/live. So if you're watching on Facebook Live tonight and wish to ask Congresswoman Spanberger a question, we encourage you to visit that online streaming portal so you can submit your question. Again, *3 on your telephone keypad gets you into the conversation. And our first question comes from Ruth in Stafford. Ruth, welcome to the call. Go ahead with your question, please.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm calling from Stafford County, and I would like to let you know that I did vote for you. I believe in your platform. My question is, I'm a retired government worker, and during the course of my years working for the government, I also worked for private industry so that when I retired, I would be able to draw Social Security as well as retirement. I had no problem getting my retirement from the government, but the problem came in when I applied for Social Security. I was told that I would only get 40% of what I put into Social Security, and I think that is grossly unfair, and nobody can give me a good reason why I was not receiving that. If they were going to split it, I think that they should have given me 60% and kept 40% for themselves. And it upsets me when I see what's going on in the world, and this country is giving billions of dollars to other countries, but they're not considering their retirees and the veterans. I think the veterans are getting the short end of the stick because it appears that they're not getting all the necessary mental, physical, and emotional care that they need from the government. And that's my question.
Well, Ruth, I thank you for this question, and I'm going to touch on the core crux of your question, but also you spoke very passionately about ensuring that we're doing what is necessary, appropriate, and earned for veterans through their service. And so I just want to reiterate to you that as a member of Congress, I continue to be a strong advocate for ensuring that veterans have the support and the benefits that they've earned. If anyone who's listening on the line is facing any challenges contending with the VA, I welcome you to call our office. We can try and work with you to answer any questions or be part of that process as you might be working through any requests with the VA. Certainly, I'm proud of the fact that we passed the Honoring Our Pact Act, which would ensure that those veterans who had toxic exposures throughout their service in the military, particularly those exposed to burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan, have the health care and the recognition that a variety of diseases that so many people have been developing are related to that service, and they have the service-connected disability recognized. So that's related to support for veterans, and I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions that anyone else listening might have. But specific to what you are talking about, Ruth, and for those on the line who may not be familiar with this, Ruth is talking about, there's two provisions within Social Security. One is called the windfall elimination provision, and one is called the government pension offset provision. Both of these provisions essentially penalize those who have worked in public service roles, and then those who have paid into Social Security. In Ruth's example, she saw only 40% of the Social Security that would typically be owed to her based on what she paid into it, right? So it's an earned benefit. She paid into it. She should have earned X amount of dollars, and she's now only receiving 40% of X earned benefit. This is a challenge. This is a flaw in the law that impacts, Ruth said she's a retired government employee. It is a flaw in the Social Security law that impacts federal employees. It impacts retired teachers. It impacts retired police officers. And it depends state to state. Some folks are more impacted than others. The kind of good news here is that I agree with you 100% that the circumstance that you are facing, Ruth, is absolutely unfair. It is absolutely inappropriate, and it is essentially the Social Security program kind of taking money out of the pockets of retirees like you, and just kind of keeping it within the system. I co-lead a bill with Republican Garrett Graves from Louisiana that is called the Social Security Fairness Act. This is legislation that would do away with the GPO and the WEP, the government pension offset, and the windfall elimination provision, that would do away with the provisions within the Social Security framework. And to be clear, this was actually only added years and years and years after Social Security was put in place. So this is not an original element of the Social Security plan. This was added decades later, and now it needs to be removed because it is hurting retirees who, like Ruth, who paid into the system and are now in their retirement seeing their retirement benefits decrease substantially. Just a couple things on this. So one, I am co-leading an effort with Garrett Graves. We have 304 members of Congress who are signed on to this legislation. I was actually just talking about it with a colleague from Ohio this evening on the House floor. My goal, right, and it is January of 2024, is to see this bill moved through the House floor, this Congress, sent to the Senate, and signed into law. It has substantial bipartisan support in the Senate as well, with 304 co-sponsors, right? And the crux of that is at 290, we can push to push the bill to the floor in an abbreviated fashion. Garrett Graves, my Republican colleague from Louisiana, and I've been pushing for this bill to move forward. We've been talking with the relevant committees that would have jurisdiction, and we are working to bring it forward. My goal is to get this bill to come forward in the coming months so that we can send it to the Senate, get it to the president's desk, and fix this problem that impacts so many retirees. Again, very many of the constituents I represent, people I have heard about this from, retired federal employees, but it also impacts retired teachers, retired police officers, and those who have pursued careers in public service, working at the state level. Again, some states are more impacted than others based on the retirement plans, but this is a serious problem and one that I've been endeavoring to fix. Ruth, thank you for raising this issue, and I am working hard to try and rectify it for you and so many other people who are impacted.
All right, moving on to our next question. We're joined now by Sam. Sam, welcome to the line. You're live with Congresswoman Spanberger. What's on your mind?
My concern is about the Houthis movement, or I don't know whether to call them a terrorist organization by now. What is the government looking at? Do we have enough intelligence to say that this is a terrorist organization, or are we only going to be attracting war with other countries like Yemen or Iraq?
Sam, thank you for this question, and certainly, I'm going to answer it from a couple perspectives. I am a member of the House Intelligence Committee, so I receive day-to-day classified briefings on issues facing U.S. national security. I'm also a former intelligence professional, having served at CIA long before I was ever elected to Congress. So your question about the Houthis is a very, very important one. I'll give the kind of current status of where things are. Anyone who's been watching the news knows that Houthis and other Iranian-backed proxy organizations have been taking escalatory steps against or targeting the United States or United States interests and United States commercial interests as well. In the Middle East. There have been escalating levels of aggression from the Houthis, targeting U.S. Service members, U.S. infrastructure. And it was just late last week that the United States took retaliatory action to do a couple things. One, to make clear to the Houthis and to anyone supporting them, including Iran, that such escalatory action will not be accepted and will not be ignored. And certainly we now have seen, and it's out in the public purview, that we have ample evidence and have intercepted missile components that were headed from Iran to the Houthis. So in terms of kind of I'm not going to speak to the classified elements of the current situation, but I would say that the United States writ large, certainly the United States Congress, and certainly members of our committee are clearly following the issue, following the threat that these Iranian-backed proxy organizations do pose, and are following closely and providing oversight to the administration as we see both diplomatic and military reactions in the region. But certainly attacks on U.S. service members and U.S. military and civilian infrastructures cannot stand.
So everyone, thank you for joining us for this live interactive telephone town hall with Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. If you have a question you would like to ask live on this call, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Again, to get involved in this live telephone town hall and to ask a question that's on your mind, all you need to do is press *3. Also, we've got a couple of questions that have been submitted online. And Congresswoman, I have a first question I'd like to pose to you. This one was sent in by David, who asks, what are you doing to address the crisis on our southern border?
David, thank you for the question. What am I doing to address the crisis on the southern border? Let me start by saying there is an absolute crisis. There's a humanitarian crisis at our southern border. Our immigration system is broken. Our border security agents and infrastructure are overstressed, and we need real legislation to fix it. Unfortunately, and I'll make some critiques of current House leadership for a moment, and then I will get back to your answering about what am I actually doing. Unfortunately, we do not see that Speaker Johnson is in any way inclined to actually bring forth legislation in the House of Representatives. We have been hearing, and I know from my Senate counterparts, that the Senate has been engaged in good faith, bipartisan discussions about and negotiations about border security and immigration reform legislation, because there's two challenges here. One, many people want to come to the United States. Of course, people want to come to the United States. We're an extraordinary country with extraordinary opportunity, and many people want to come to the United States. And many employers here in the United States want to hire individuals. We also have a border infrastructure, border system that is overstressed. And we as a country absolutely have a right to know who is coming into the country, what is coming into the country in terms of cargo and items through trade and through our ports of entry. But the system is wholly overstressed. The Senate, again, is having good faith negotiations on border security and immigration reform. But unfortunately, here in the House of Representatives, Speaker Johnson has continued to say that he doesn't think that that he will be amenable to bringing up whatever it is that the Senate votes on. And to be clear, let me just remind everyone, based on the current rules of the Senate, any bill that would pass in the Senate that would come to the House would have to receive 60 votes. That means, based on the makeup of the Senate, it would have to be a very bipartisan bill, Democrats and Republicans in broad agreement, in order to even get that bill to pass the Senate and come to the House. So that's one element that is occurring on the other side of the Capitol within the Senate, though I have a significant worry that even if they were to pass strong legislation, getting it taken up for a vote here on the House side is something that the Speaker said he won't do. In terms of what I'm doing, I am a co-sponsor of a bill called the Dignity Act. This is a bipartisan piece of legislation that I am so happy and pleased to support. It's a bill written by Veronica Escobar, a Democrat from Texas, and Maria Salazar, a Republican from Florida. And together, those two led a strong effort of members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, taking a strong look at our immigration process, our asylum process, what is not working, what does our economy need, how do we streamline and recognize the need for more H-2A visas for individuals who are going to come and work as part of the agricultural workforce. How do we streamline an asylum process, which people have the right to file for asylum, but our asylum process takes years and it's a system that is just not working. What do our border security agents need? What sort of technologies could they be leveraging to make their job, modernize the job that they are doing? This bill gets at all of that. So within the House of Representatives, while the Senate is doing their argument or their debates, their negotiations, on the House side, I am working to try and get more Democrats and Republicans to support the Dignity Act. And hope that we could move that forward in the House and push it to the Senate, or if the Senate moves first, take their bill up. It is a pressing issue. Certainly, the administration has put forth a request for additional funding to support our Border Patrol and our needs at the southern border. I support additional funding, particularly to make sure that the men and women who are doing the work of protecting our country and honoring our values at the southern border, in particular, have what they need. But it is not just about funding. In the long term, we need to reform our system. And frankly, we need to have legislators who are willing to stop arguing about this issue on television and actually try to fix it. One of the sad realities of the moment is it is much, much easier to say this is a problem, this is a crisis, than actually endeavor to try and fix it. And so I will acknowledge this is a problem, this is a crisis. And I have just presented you with what it is that I am trying to do, which is working on and now advocating for this legislation that I am proud to support. And I'll be honest, it's bipartisan. There's parts I love, there's parts I don't like nearly as much, but that is what happens when you come together and you try to negotiate a bill to solve an actual issue. So I'm going to continue to work for that bill to move forward within the House, for us to gain more co-sponsorship. And in tandem, I'll continue to stay looped in with my Senate counterparts as they go through their negotiations. And if they move faster than the House, which is probably honestly likely, I will look to be supportive of their efforts. But thank you for raising this issue. And this is the key. Like, can't be an issue that for the next 10 years people just argue about or debate about or tweet about. We actually need to govern, and we actually need to fix what so many of us recognize as a system that just is not working.
Joining us now, we have Anthony in Woodbridge. Anthony, you're live with Congresswoman Spanberger. What's your question?
Hello, Congresswoman Spanberger. Thank you so much for taking my question. I know you probably addressed this question. Hi. I know you probably addressed this question several times in the past, but I live in Woodbridge, but I work in Washington, D.C., and I am actually a disabled veteran, and the commute to get to work is absolutely ridiculous. Either I'm going to pay about $250 a week to get to work, or I'm going to sit in traffic for 2 hours each way. Is there anything out there that's going to help us commuters get back and forth from Washington, D.C. to Virginia or to anywhere in this area that's in the works at the moment? Because right now it just seems like we're just paying. We paid for the road to be built in the first place with our taxpayer dollars. Now we got to pay to be able to use the HOV lanes. And it just seems like we're just paying. Is there anything out there that's going to offer us commuters any kind of relief? And I know that there was a deal done when the HOV was built that the government couldn't do anything to improve the traffic unless they'll have to pay, I think, like $90 million to this private company in order to satisfy their agreement. So is there anything out there right now in the legislation that's going to help us commuters get back and forth to work, to give us some relief without having to pay $250 a week?
Well, Anthony, I'm going to begin by agreeing with you on the trials and painful nature that we all experience sometimes sitting on 95. If you look at a map of Virginia's 7th district, and particularly, it's a large district, larger than the state of Delaware, but the population density is right up and down 95. So I think there's probably many people on the line right now that can empathize with you, have spent plenty of time sitting, not driving, sitting on 95. And you did touch on a variety of elements related to HOV lanes and the nature of those original agreements. So let me tell you from a federal perspective what I have worked on, what I have done, and some of the things that in the future are coming to Virginia to help address traffic congestion on 90, that we face on 95, but then also relatedly in other regions. So the bipartisan infrastructure law is a bill that we got signed into law a couple years back, and we are now seeing the results of that law. So basically, it was major investments in roads and bridges and repairs. It's major investments in railway systems. So let me give two examples of the way that we could see positive impact on the I-95 corridor. So along the I-95 corridor, if you are on 95, or if you decide that you want to get off 95 and take side roads, as you well know, there are waterways along the way. Part of the beauty of Virginia is all of our rivers. Part of the challenges with our traffic is crossing those rivers. So with the infrastructure law, we already know that dollars that Virginia has received from the infrastructure law is already moving towards repairs of bridges along the I-95 corridor. So those who choose to get off of I-95 and take side roads should have, as those bridges and improvements are made, it will allow for additional traffic to move more quickly on some of those side roads. There is also major investments that we just announced related to rail projects. So there will be a third rail added through Spotsylvania, Stafford, in Prince William, headed north to DC for those who choose to commute on rail. The goal here, and why I mentioned this to you, even though you talked about I-95, Anthony, is that part of the challenge that I hear from constituents is those who might be inclined to take rail worry sometimes about the reliability and the availability. Well, making rail improvements, adding a third track, and then also making ensuring safe and quick passage over the bridge into DC makes rail more reliable, and into the future will give another option. And Anthony, whether you choose to take the option of rail travel or not, hopefully many people who are driving next to you along 95, that might be the right choice for them. And so having more reliable and steady rail passage up the I-95 corridor, starting as far south as Richmond, but certainly through some of the commuter areas starting in Spotsylvania, Stafford, and Prince William will be incredibly important. And there's also funding coming to Virginia from the infrastructure bill, specifically to help congestion, to reduce congestion, improve commute times. And so that funding can be allocated for various different types of priorities state to state. And we know that funding is coming to Virginia, and I will be following very, very closely to make sure that when brought to Virginia, it is actually utilized in ways that will address congestion, certainly on the 95 corridor, on 95 and on roads in the corridor as well. So there's not one quick fix, but I do hope that was helpful in addressing some of the results of that infrastructure law and the ways that into the future, as these investments are made, as these dollars are deployed, that we will see major improvements, particularly in the I-95 corridor. This is a major priority for me. It is a major priority for so many of the people that I represent, and I am continuing to track it into the future.
Remember, if you have a question on your mind, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Again, got a question? Please press *3 to ask it live on this call. Also, if you'd like to receive updates from our office via email, please press *6 on your phone keypad at any time, and an operator will collect your email address and get you signed up. Now let's go to Monique. Monique, you are live with Congresswoman Spanberger. What's your question?
Good evening, Congresswoman. This is Monique Samuels from DLA Aviation in Richmond, Virginia. I'm the local president of AFGE, Local 1992. My question is, you mentioned earlier about the appropriations bill that needs to be passed. And when does, I guess, the stopgap that's going on right now, when does that end? Because you said they need to do another one that will probably last until March, but when does this current?
So as of right now, thank you for the question. As of right now, if we do not take action, and we should be taking action this week, and by this week, likely Friday, the government is first slated to have a partial shutdown as of Friday if we do not pass a continuing resolution on Friday. That is why immediate action is required. The Senate should be taking up the continuing resolution tomorrow. We will then should vote on Friday. It should immediately go to the president, and we should mitigate any potential risk of a shutdown there. The other challenge is that we have a potential partial government shutdown this Friday, and then the second full government shutdown the beginning of February. The stopgap funding measure that we would be voting on ideally Friday, would extend us through March. So what is currently kind of an emergency situation for a potential partial shutdown this week and in early February, we will push both of those deadlines into March. Then before we reach that March timeframe, we would need to pass full appropriations bills, or just from a procedural standpoint, or partial, another stopgap funding, which is should not be the path we pursue. And then ideally before those March deadlines at the beginning of March, we will pass full appropriations.
All right, Congresswoman, I'm looking at a question that was submitted online by Rick. And Rick wonders, or states actually, military support to Ukraine is critical to democracy worldwide. When do you think the military support will begin again?
Sorry, it's a little bit of a technical problem in my office. My monitor went out. So for those who might have noticed a pause, I was just switching from my monitor to my computer. Very serious question, Rick, related to funding for Ukraine. There was a meeting at the White House with the president and what's called the Four Corners. So the Speaker of the House, the Democratic leader, the majority and minority leaders in the Senate. You mentioned it in your question, but I'm going to restate it. The United States supporting Ukraine is an effort in us taking actions that are wholly consistent with democratic values of preserving and protecting freedom. It is also in our best national security interests to support Ukrainian efforts to defeat the Russian army. Russia invaded Ukraine, a sovereign nation, and our efforts to support them, providing them with communications aid, providing them with intelligence support, and providing them with the weapons system and lethal aid that they need, their soldiers need on the ground to wage that war, is vitally important to their ability to defeat Putin's army and end this war. It is also vitally important to our own national security interests. The minute, if it were to occur, that Russia were to defeat Ukraine and to continue on into Poland, or to decide to head northward into Finland, take those sorts of aggressive action, at that point in time, it becomes a NATO challenge. At that point in time, it is the United States' military engagement. And so I cannot state strongly enough that this is not a question of us getting involved in other people's battles. This is us supporting another country's fight for democracy, in doing so, ensuring that we don't have to fight battles. The readout from the meeting with the president does not appear that it was particularly successful. This is a bipartisan issue that garners bipartisan support. Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican leader in the Senate, has been clear and focused since the very beginning of the war in Ukraine that the United States should be supporting our Ukrainian allies as they fight for their freedom. Republican Mitch McConnell, Democrat Senator Schumer, certainly on the House side, broad support. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries continues to support. And frankly, a broad number of Republicans in the House of Representatives support continued support to Ukraine, particularly those like the chair of the Intelligence Committee, which is a committee I serve on. Chairman Turner has been a strong advocate for support to Ukraine. Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mike McCall, Republican from Texas, has been a strong and vocal supporter of continued support to Ukraine, because these individuals, in their roles as chairman of the Intel Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, understand how vitally important the provision of U.S. aid is. And I know that I have spent a lot of time essentially agreeing with the frame of your question, but for anyone listening, it is so incredibly important that people recognize that it's in our U.S. national security interest to support Ukraine, and it has broad bipartisan support. And the thing standing in our way at this moment is a Speaker of the House who is beholden to a small group of a small faction within the Republican Party that is threatening essentially the Speaker of the House. And so it is for that reason that we have not yet seen an aid bill come forward, either standalone for Ukraine or paired with Ukraine, aid for Israel, or humanitarian aid, or aid for Taiwan, or even financial support to the southern border, as we know is necessary. So I will continue to advocate for, when given the opportunity to vote for support to Ukraine, I will do so. But the primary crux of the challenge right now is that we have a Speaker of the House who will not bring it. And I've been working with, and frankly relying on, my Republican counterparts to make clear to him why this is so incredibly important. The votes are there to pass it without question. It's really just an issue of if and when he will bring it.
Our next question comes from Lori in Dale City. Lori, welcome to the call. You're live with Congresswoman Spanberger. What's your question?
Well, thank you, Congressman Spanberger, first of all, for having these town halls where we have a chance to ask questions. You spoke about a bill that you are a part of, championing. I can't say it tonight, sorry. On the southern. Can you go into a little more detail on what might be in that bill as it moves forward to actually tighten up our southern border?
Absolutely. So the bill that I mentioned is called the Dignity Act. And it is a bipartisan piece of legislation, as I mentioned, sponsored by, written by a Democrat from Texas and a Republican from Florida. And I mentioned where they're from because I think it's relevant to the larger discussion related to immigration. Certainly immigration issues impact every state across the country, but I think that recognizing that a representative from El Paso, Texas is among those who knows very clearly the challenges that we face with our immigration system. So essentially there is components of it that would reform our asylum system. And what I mean by that is ensuring that when someone enters into the asylum system, it is a faster process. Right now, the system is slow, it's delayed. And we know that people who come to the United States that might file for asylum, there is no, it takes years to go through that process. And frankly, from the perspective of the United States, ensuring that people can go through that process quickly is important. But also that that there are additional immigration judges, and that we can support agriculture. So let me just kind of go through it a couple things. So it would create, it would reform our visa process, right? The visa process in its current format is not working. We have an outdated asylum process. We have an outdated asylum seeking process. It takes too long when people start to flow through the system. It can take years. They are in limbo for years. During that period of time, their kids might be in school, they are spending time, and their work capacity in terms of what they are actually legally able to do, legally work, is limited and has constraints put on it. From the border security standpoint, which I think was the crux of your question, It is funding for additional border infrastructure, specifically additional funding for upgraded technology, and increased personnel. What we know, and I have engaged with folks who work the border on past visit to the border, also when folks have come to Capitol Hill to talk about the challenges. There are just not enough people in terms of personnel, but there are so many technologies available at the current moment that would both speed processing time and also support interdiction efforts, be it interdiction of illicit items, fentanyl, or other illicit items, other types of drugs, but then also efforts to bring folks across the border in a legal manner. The bill would also ensure that we could be supporting agriculture. So, particularly in Virginia, agriculture is our number one private industry, and agricultural workers, folks who come to the United States on H-2A visas, are vital to our economy, vital to the farmers and producers who I represent. And across the board, one of the number one concerns and complaints that I hear from producers is that there just are not enough H-2A visas. And so it creates many problems in the systems. Producers have to apply for more people than they actually need. They're spending more money on applications that for individuals that they can't actually bring here. It is a program that works well when it works. And this system, this bill would reform the system, ensure that we had more visas. And I mention that because the crux of your question related to border security. But the honest circumstance is that many people come to the United States because there are jobs here for them, and there are people here who want to hire them. And so in the agriculture space, which I'll use as an example, if we had the ability to get more visas for agricultural workers in Virginia, we would ensure that people who want to come to the United States can do so legally, that the employers, the producers across Virginia that might want to hire a temporary or seasonal or agricultural worker can do so legally, that they know who they're hiring because that individual came through the process. It also takes some of the pressure off of the larger immigration system, because rather than having someone cross the border illegally in order to come work in Virginia or elsewhere, we now have created additional avenues for the job that exists in Virginia. We now have created a circumstance by which someone can apply for a visa, come to the United States, work that job, and it takes pressure off of the immigration system infrastructure at the border, because that is now a visit to the embassy. That is now a visit to a consulate. That is now an airplane trip to the United States, like passport in hand. And so it's meeting the needs, certainly, of employers in the economy here, but it is also taking pressure. A proper immigration system that works takes pressure off of the border infrastructure, because it would be lowering the number of people who would be choosing to or seeing that their only option might be to cross illegally.
So do you have a question you'd like to ask Congresswoman Spanberger? Now is definitely the time to press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Again, if you have a question you'd like to ask, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. And I've got another question here, Congresswoman, submitted online. This one comes from Daniel, who asks, how do we stop both parties from weaponizing government shutdown?
So Daniel, thank you for this question. I'm going to begin by saying I think that, well, I recognize the reason that you're asking the question, because I do think that certainly, folks on both sides of the aisle can engage in what I might consider to be performative politics instead of effective governance. The one place where there is not weaponization of government shutdowns is really on the Democratic side of the aisle. I'm very proud to be very bipartisan. I'm very proud to work across party lines on issues that matter. I'm also very proud of the fact that I have yet to see anyone on the Democratic side of the aisle ever try and weaponize or attempt to see a government shutdown. The very true reality is that there are some folks on the other side of the aisle who have spent so long impugning the government or so long criticizing the government that they have created a reality where they don't necessarily think that shutting down the government matters, right? That their constituents wouldn't be hurt if the government were shut down. And that is really part of the challenge. What I would like to see in terms of how we actually get away from the weaponization, or even if it's not a weaponized in a political sense, the very reality that we even have risks of government shutdown. I think it is kind of, let me just tell you some of the things that happen structurally, right? So right now we are already in January of 2024. The federal government's fiscal year ends in September. So we are in fiscal year 2024. Fiscal year 2024 ends in September. By the traditional process, we should be doing appropriations for FY25 now. We should be doing appropriations for FY25 now so that those bills can be signed into law by the end of September, thereby funding FY25 before FY25 actually starts. We're still talking about FY24. So we are obviously not on path to be on time for FY25 already, and it is January of 2024. And I'm walking you through, this is sort of the nitty gritty, the process of it, but the reason I'm walking you through this is because there are real just structural fixes to get us away from this circumstance. Because even the threat of a government shutdown hurts the small businesses, hurts the contractors, hurts the federal employees, certainly across Virginia and certainly across the 7th District. Because if you think you're going to go without a paycheck, even though federal employees are going to get theirs eventually, contractors won't, small business owners won't, right? You start to say, okay, I need to make sure that I'm not spending money because I might have to pay rent without a paycheck coming in. I might have to pay my mortgage without rent coming in. I might have to pay daycare without my paycheck coming in. And then so you don't go to the restaurant, you don't go to the store and pick up things for around the house, right? And it impacts our economy in Virginia. We need to be doing appropriations bills on time. By tradition, Congress is typically not in session in the month of August, right? The end of the fiscal year is the end of September. By tradition, we're not here in August. Now, people will like to say recess. I promise you, anytime I'm not on Capitol Hill, I'm across the district, I'm doing work. I'm not saying that members of Congress are not working in August, because I know I work a lot in August across the district, doing events and visiting with people and seeing businesses, et cetera. But things change. If we are not going to get our appropriations bills done, if we haven't passed them out of committee by June and July, then perhaps we rethink a month back home in our districts. Maybe we save that for October, after we've actually funded the government for the next fiscal year. So there are structural elements to the way this place works that, with the kind of back and forth fighting over funding the government and over appropriations, that I think structurally creates problems. I've been in conversations with some of my colleagues across the aisle about even the thought of doing 2-year appropriations. Some of the things that people will say, and I was talking with some of the Freedom Caucus folks about this, right? And at times, some of the Freedom Caucus folks are the biggest problems when it comes to funding the government. But thinking through, what does it look like to avoid this yearly challenge, when is it not perhaps more cost effective even to fund a government agency, to tell DOD, this is the money you are getting for FY24 and FY25. From a budgetary standpoint, is there not better continuity in that? And then from a Capitol Hill standpoint, like, we get that done. And then the next Congress, you do it again. And the next Congress, you do it again, right? Every 2 years. So I have spent a lot of time engaging with colleagues on what the fixes are. Do we change the calendar? Do we change the way we do appropriations? I have not arrived at a successful effort to kind of upend the system that is not working. But I will say that when we are careening back and forth towards potential government shutdowns all along the way, it just hurts people. It hurts the economy. I have been a former federal employee. I was a CIA officer at a station abroad. We were facing a potential government shutdown, and we went around in a circle and had to say what we were working on to determine, who would be essential or who would be non-essential. Literally, as a CIA officer working terrorism cases, we sat there and said, okay, well, I'm working this terrorism case. Well, I'm working this XYZ case. I'm working this case. In the end, we were all essential based on the work we were doing. But the fact that we even wasted an hour doing that because, Congress back in Washington was fighting over this or that, or not prioritizing doing their job on time. When I was accounting for dollars I was spending as a federal employee, I sure had to do that on time. I think that the problem is that, I think no budget, no pay. I have been engaged on all of the things. We don't get our appropriations done on time. We don't get paid. That's a way to incentivize members of Congress because, and I will leave you with this because certainly I could talk about it far too long. When there are government shutdowns, members of Congress still get paid. It is the absolutely most ridiculous reality in this whole mess is that the government could shut down, every few weeks and members of Congress would never be impacted. Certainly, I lead legislation, and I have since I first got to Congress, to change that. In the event of a government shutdown, members of Congress don't get paid. I think members of Congress and their staffs, our staffs, shouldn't get paid because certainly that is a way to impact. If everyone looking at you is saying you did this and I'm not sure how I'm going to pay my child's daycare bill, perhaps that makes it deeply personal. But that is a reality that exists, that even when there are government shutdowns, members of Congress get paid. I think it's atrocious and horrible. And I am trying to change that, as well as make a system that is currently not optimally working actually just work. So I hear you. I think I've probably just identified more problems in the system, but elements of how we can try and improve it. Certainly, I hope you know that I'm thinking about this and digging deep on the issue because it's just unacceptable that we careen from potential shutdown to potential shutdown.
Congresswoman, just looking up at the clock, it looks like we're just coming up towards the end of this call. I want to make sure, though, that before we close, that I give you a chance to provide some closing remarks and thoughts.
Zirk, thank you for moderating. To everyone who called in or messaged in with a question, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me tonight. I dove a little deeper on some of the process issues than I typically do, but I think that from everything from the appropriations process to the Ukraine funding process, I hope it's helpful for me to explain a bit of kind of the weeds of it and what's happening, how we're going to move things forward. And so I appreciate the question. Anyone who wants to track the things that we are working on Capitol Hill, please, you should know that we have a newsletter we send out once a week with updates from Capitol Hill, the legislation that I'm working on, the places that I visit, the constituent services that the district team is working on. And you can sign up for that if you go to spanberger.house.gov. We'll also give you updates when we're doing town halls or other events that are occurring. So please do sign up for that. Again, anyone who might be facing a challenge with a federal agency, I welcome you to give our team a call and we can try and help you through that process. And just thank you for the questions this evening. We touched on everything from infrastructure to government funding to Social Security to international affairs. And I thank you for your time. I thank you for the privilege of serving you as your representative. And I hope everyone is staying safe and staying warm. And I think the weather reports are calling for additional snow later in the week. So please do stay safe, stay warm, and stay off the roads when you are able. Thank you so very much. And if I can be of service or help you with anything, please be in touch with my office. Have a good evening.
As noted, I'm sorry, Congresswoman.
Thank you. No, appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
As noted, we are coming to the end of this live event this evening. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us for this important Virginia-focused telephone town hall with Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. We truly appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions, but if we weren't able to get to your question this evening, please call our district office during normal business hours at 703-987-2180. That office number again, 703-987-2180. Or you can go online to spanberger.house.gov. Thanks again for your time. We hope you stay healthy and safe and have a wonderful rest of your week.